Appreciate you being here. Thank you, sir. All right, welcome to History Notes. I'm your host, Rodney Dawson, Curator of Education here at the Greensboro History Museum. And as you may be aware, we are really targeting what's happened in the end of May, May 30th, May 30th and May 31st into early June, dealing with the protests following the death of George Floyd. And so we're kind of in a social, racial justice reckoning. And so we've been in the streets talking to business owners. We've been talking to protest organizers. We've been talking to muralists. We are actually pleased to be in the gallery where it's unfinished now. So if you go around the corner, you're going to see chairs and paint and things like that. But one thing we thought we were missing, or we're missing a lot, but we said we're missing the law enforcement perspective. And especially at a time like this when we have two African-American heads of law enforcement bodies, the Sheriff's Department, and of course the Greensboro Police Department. So I'm glad that we reached out to you and you're able to make time and come talk to us and be a part of today's History Notes, talking about Chief Brian James of the Greensboro Police Department. So thank you for being out here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, now you're a product of this town, right?
Yeah, grew up right here in Northeast Greensboro. All my life, went through the Greensboro City Schools at that time. Went to A&T State University, Aggie Pride, and right after that got into law enforcement, started out with the Guilford County Sheriff's Office for a couple of years, and then came to the police department in 1996.
1996. Now I was doing the math. I looked that up. So you're approaching 25 years of service.
Yeah, almost 25 with the Greensboro Police Department.
Exactly. And you've been in the training division. You work for, I can call it CID now.
Yeah.
Sound cool.
Yeah, CID.
Criminal investigations.
Right.
And then you were in the neighborhood resource.
Yeah, worked in that. We have officers still to this day assigned to our public housing areas.
Okay.
And that was a great program for me to be involved in early in my career, and it continues to be a success to this day because really it just lays the foundation for police work in community policing, and that's what we still believe in to this day.
So building relationships.
Absolutely. You can't be effective in a community if you don't have a relationship with the community that you serve.
Gotcha. And did you pick that up when you were working in the resource center, or is that something you walked in to the building?
I'll tell you, I knew how important it was. Even when I started out, when I had the opportunity, when I was in patrol, I would, if I wasn't on a call, I'd try to park my car, maybe walk a couple of blocks, talk to people and things like that. And I think somebody noticed it because I kind of got recruited into that program.
Gotcha.
And so that enabled me to be assigned specifically to a housing community, and that's what I did every day, was just walk the site and had a chance to get to know people and have them get to know me as well. Good
stuff, good stuff. And from right there on Phillips Avenue, you're from, all right. And so you're the chief in 2020. You took office in what, February?
February 1st, official first day.
Okay. Yeah. And so working all those different entities within the police department, historically, what would you say are, I'm talking about the Greensboro Police Department and its relations to the community. Historically, what have been strengths and what have been areas that need improvement?
I think, I'll say this, one of the areas that's been a strength for us is we have had good relationships with the community, and that has evolved over time. I think that as police work in general, and specifically in Greensboro, we have had good relationships. But at the same time, what needs improvement is that we do have some parts of the community that still have a lack of trust in the police department. And what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how we can bridge those gaps and have those conversations with the communities that may not necessarily trust the police. And of course, in the time that we're in right now, it may be one of the most difficult times to do that, but we still feel like it's important, and that's still what we plan to do.
All right. So prior to, we had things that have happened with Marcus Smith and other situations, but specifically speaking with the events that were, I hate to use this word, but sparked by the death of George Floyd. So prior to May 30th, when the first protest happened, the first demonstration, what was your focus as a police department?
It's kind of hard to say in the year that we're in, and I say that because we're still dealing with the coronavirus and things like that. We were trying to figure out how to still maintain our connections with the community and to do them safely. What I did back in February when I first got the job is I went on a community-wide tour where I was having meetings with people in various neighborhoods. Yeah, I was doing that. We had to cut that a little bit short because of the COVID-19 concerns. In addition to that, we were planning to do community classrooms, which is something we're still going to do. And community classrooms, what I mean is like taking different law enforcement topics and covering those. Like one of the first ones we were going to do was going to be vehicle stops, because a lot of people have questions about, okay, what should I do on a vehicle stop? What are my rights? Things like that. And we were going to cover that. In addition, we were also going to do some community walks, and we had some neighborhoods that had reached out to us through the initial meetings and said they would like to do some community walks with us, like through their neighborhoods. So, so we're still planning to do those things. It's just that now we've had to kind of hit the reset button because we have had the recent events, and then also we still have the COVID-19 concerns. So everything we do, we have to take that into consideration. But what I do know is that we can't just stop in our tracks where we are and wait for a vaccine, because we've still got to cultivate those community relationships.
Well, that brings up a question I was going to ask later, but you're segueing into it now. I wanted you to kind of paint the scene as to, we're approaching, you understand that it might be a demonstration and we don't know the size or the scope of it. But knowing that you have to be prepared for it, I just can't, I can see the hesitancy, or maybe not that, but just the concern to send officers out to be side by side with one another and to be in the midst of hundreds of other folks in a time of COVID-19. How did you all deal with that?
Very carefully. And what I'll say is that from a COVID-19 concern, I think we certainly put our officers in more risk than we would have otherwise. We certainly want to support First Amendment speech and a right to protest or demonstrate peacefully. But at the same time, the CDC and everyone else has said that, large gatherings increase the likelihood or the risk of someone having COVID-19. So we definitely had to take that into consideration. Of course, when appropriate, which may not always be appropriate, masks, gloves, things like that, hand washing, the things that they tell you to do, but at the same time, public safety was paramount in all of these situations. So I think that we kind of had to, we really had to look at what the risks were from a public safety standpoint, from a COVID-19 standpoint. And quite often public safety wins out on that. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So once you find out, how did you find out there would be a demonstration?
We got the information from various sources. What I'll say in this day and time, a lot of things are put on social media. Typically, I guess like way back in the day, people had to find out through word of mouth and things like that, and through actual pamphlets or publications. Now somebody can post something on a social media site, and you can gather up a number of people to hold a demonstration or any kind of event if you think about it. So when we found that out, we had to make sure that, of course, we had the staff in place to make sure that we could do it safely, whether that be shut down streets or whatever the case was. But it was definitely a concern. The first thing I thought about was COVID-19. Because with large gatherings and then putting officers right there in the midst of it, we knew there would be an increased risk. What I'll say is, fortunately, we have had a few cases in the department, but I don't know of any cases that evolved from any of the officers working the protest. Okay. So it's mostly outdoors, and I know the risks are significantly less if you're outdoors, so we didn't have any of that.
Now, Greensboro is a town of almost 300,000 people, but we're not known as a Detroit or Chicago or New York, so when protests happen, I don't expect to see CNN here unless something drastic happens. But as the police, who's only, 3-4 months on the job at this point?
Yeah, I guess that was about right at the time. Yeah, about 3-4 months. Yeah.
What goes through your mind in regards to your officers where you say, I'll tell you this, I watch a lot of television, news and stuff, but I watch In the Heat of the Night. Okay. And there was an episode where this civil rights worker, former civil rights activist, kind of like a Martin Luther King for the show, was coming to town. And they were talking to the police chief about providing protection. The police chief said, yeah, because this town, if we don't do it right, this town is going to be famous for something it doesn't want to be famous for. So that stuck with me when I knew you were coming.
Mm-hmm.
When you know you have an event like this,
Mm-hmm.
a demonstration, what goes through your head saying that this? I don't want us to be famous for something we don't want to be famous for. So what was like the chief concern for you, other than COVID?
Well, the first thing is you got to have a plan. You know, you got to have an operational plan as to how you're going to manage it, and that's based on information that we have, where we know people will be, what they might want to do, things like that. The other part is making sure that you got key leaders in place, and then making sure that I'm communicating with those leaders so they know what my desires are. You know.
Now, how are you doing that? That goes into another question. Are you at home or are you?
No, I was there.
You were downtown?
I was downtown. Yeah, every time we had a protest on the ground, I was at the office.
Okay.
Yeah, so making sure that I was constantly communicating with command staff, and they communicated with supervisors, and making sure that we were all on the same page. So more or less kind of knowing, like, if, you know, playing out scenarios, if this happens or if something else happens, how we're going to react to it, how we respond to it. And then making sure that our officers on the ground have definite instructions on how to handle situations and what would be tolerated and what would not be tolerated.
Okay. Now, during the protest, was there any one or two events that you could talk about that raised your eyebrow or made you really communicate to your officers on the ground saying?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, more than 95% of all the activity we had in Greensboro was peaceful.
Right.
We did experience some vandalism and some break-ins along the Elm Street corridor, and that has been tough to navigate, I will say. And the reason why I say that is because anytime I'm making decisions about how to respond to a significant event like that, somebody's not going to like my decision every time. And when I look at that situation, you know, we had officers that had objects, including rocks, thrown at them, while at the same time we had people that were damaging businesses along that Elm Street corridor, and that was on that first Saturday and Sunday night. You know, we got some people that think that you know, we reacted too harshly, and some people think we didn't react enough, that we should have done more. And what we tried to do was to make a decision that would keep the public safe, because there were some peaceful protesters in the midst of the chaos, but to make a decision that would keep them safe as well as keep our officers safe. So, you know, we did suffer some property damage downtown, but I am happy to say that no one was hurt.
Right.
No citizens were hurt and no officers were hurt. And when I look at it from my point of view, if I can make that statement, then that is a huge win for us.
Okay. Now, when I talked to some of the protest organizers, they told me that there were police that came to them and warned them there are some folks that are here not to support you, and that you, I guess for lack of a better term, you might be in danger. Did you hear that? I guess they were tipped off, and then they wanted to let the organizers, the protest participants, and the organizers know that might be some white supremacists here, or someone that's just disgruntled by the fact that you're present. And I was even, did you hear that, and did you warn some of the protesters?
I didn't know about, of course, not every single communication, because I know that a lot of our officers that were on the ground were having dialogue with the protesters, and that's something that we encourage, because oftentimes when someone is planning a protest, we actually plan it with them. We say, okay, you want to organize at this location, you want to march down this particular street, you know, and so we can actually provide better service and actually better protection for them if we know where they're going. Because oftentimes what we worry about is if there's a counter group that's coming. If everybody is protesting in solidarity for the same thing, I'm not as concerned. But when counter protesters show up and you got two groups that are clashing, that's when we get really concerned, and that's when we have to be prepared to stand in that gap to keep those two separate groups apart from each other.
Now, are you working in conjunction with the sheriff's department, the fire department? How is your relationship with other areas within the city?
We have great relationships with our partners. Fire, of course, Greensboro Fire, we had them on standby for a number of different reasons for the functions that they carry out, as well as always having one of them with our command staff. The sheriff's department we have a relationship with. They did assist us on several occasions throughout the protest. We also partner with High Point Police at one point as well.
Now, why High Point?
Well, the first night when we had activity and we did have some damage downtown, High Point was actually not having any protest at all.
Okay.
So we essentially have a mutual aid agreement where if one of us needs assistance, that we'll help each other.
Okay.
So we enacted that mutual aid agreement, and of course the sheriff has jurisdiction over all of Guilford County. So I was able to call the sheriff and get some additional help from the sheriff's office.
All right, and that leaves me, and I'll get you out of here with a couple more questions.
Okay.
But that leaves me, we have yourself, Chief James, and you're not the first African-American police chief. Was it Chief Daughtry?
I'm actually the fourth.
The fourth?
Yeah, it was Chief Daughtry, Chief Robert White, Chief Tim Bellamy, and I am the fourth African-American chief in Greensboro.
And Chief Daughtry was in the 80s, right?
Yeah, he was actually chief for 11 years,
Okay.
87 through 1998. He was the chief when I got...
Typically, how long does a chief serve?
I mean, it really depends. I say on average, most chiefs serve right around 4 years on average. You know, it kind of depends on how much time you have once you actually get the job and things like that.
Busy job. You have to have a chief of staff?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So a lot of people that I have to have, because I have so many people reaching out to me, I just have to have somebody to try to help me manage all that and make sure we're responsive to everyone.
Well, so we have Chief Brian James, African American. We have Sheriff Danny Rogers, African American, approaching this demonstration, this reckoning of social and racial justice that's because of the death of an African American. How does that dynamic play out? You know, as you're a law enforcement officer first, but how does it? But you're also an African American. How does that play out in your mind?
Well, I'll tell you this. So as African American, I mean, obviously, you know, I was a black man before I was a police officer, and after I retire, I'll still be black.
Right.
So most of what has made me as a person has been through the black experience. However, I've been in law enforcement for a number of years. And I also understand a lot of it is shaped around what I've learned in law enforcement. What I'll say is that first and foremost, the safety of everyone participating. Because if you look at the protesters, it was actually a pretty diverse crowd on many of those days. I saw a lot of white protesters, a lot of people that appeared to be of various nationalities. But I think that the public, I think, looks at the office differently when there's an African-American person in the office. And I think that sometimes, you know, they may expect, you know, certain things of me as a black police chief. And I think on some respects they should. I think because I certainly understand why people are frustrated, understand why people are mad. What I hope happens after all this is said and done, I hope that now that we've got everyone's attention, that the real work will happen. I think that you know, you're still seeing some protests throughout the country, and what I'll say is that I'm thankful that for right now it's quiet in Greensboro, but I think now is when the real work comes, when you have to sit down and have the conversations and things like that. And I think that myself and the sheriff, I think we have a great opportunity to make our respective agencies better. And my hope is that when I do decide to walk away from law enforcement, this agency is better than it was when I found it as a police chief.
I think you're on track.
I hope so.
All right. Well, 30 seconds for these next two questions. Okay. What does a good day look like for Chief James?
A good day is a quiet day. Is when I don't have a ton of meetings and I can call up some people in the community and go see them and sit down and have a cup of coffee. I guess when you could sit down and have a cup of coffee, and really just get some thoughts and ideas from people about, you know, what they're seeing in the community and some things that we need to pay attention to.
All right. What does a good day in 30 seconds look like for Brian James?
Riding my motorcycle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What kind you got?
I got a.
I'm talking like I got a bike.
Well, I got a cruiser.
Okay.
Yeah, I got like one of those big cruisers. It's an old man bike. It's got like a backrest on it and everything. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's kind of like my stress relief. And of course, I mean, spending time with my family. I got a wife. I got 3 daughters. One is a fully grown adult, and I got one in college and one in high school. But yeah, just spending time with them and just, you know, when I get a chance to jump on that motorcycle, I try to do that and just kind of clear my head a little bit.
All right, so you're the chief of police for all of Greensboro. There's a football game between Smith High School and Page.
Okay.
Whom are you rooting for?
Oh, I'm rooting for Paige. I mean, yeah. I mean, I can't. Yeah, I can. That's part of that's part of my DNA. Now, I love all my Greensboro people, but Paige High School, I learned a lot of lessons, playing football, and really they've kind of carried me throughout life.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, Chief, I appreciate you coming out on History Notes and talking to us. As you see, we're going to have this exhibit, and we're either going to feature this online and inside on a monitor inside this gallery here.
Okay.
But we wanted to get everyone's perspective, and we were missing a law enforcement perspective. We do plan on talking to a couple others, but we're so thankful, Mr. Glenn and yourself, for making time to come talk to us on History Notes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.